I wasn't supposed to notice her the way I did. She was just another customer that Tuesday, a woman waiting by the counter while I tried to fix a coffee machine that hadn't worked since the previous winter. But some people walk into a room like they've been there in another life, and you feel it before you understand it. The shop smelled of oil and burnt dust, the kind that clings to your sleeves. The fan clicked every few seconds, a slow metronome in the background. She stood by the counter, reading the faded menu that no one had updated in years. Her hair was tied up, not neatly, just enough to keep it out of her face. When she looked up, her eyes met mine in the reflection of the glass door. A brief second. Then she looked away, like it hadn't happened. "Machine's old," I said, more to fill the silence than to help. "Might be better off getting a new one." She smiled, faintly. "You'd be out of a job then, wouldn't you?" I didn't have a clever answer, so I just laughed under my breath and went back to tightening the valve. But her voice lingered. It had that quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. When I handed her the receipt, our fingers brushed. Not by accident, not on purpose either. Just one of those small moments that happens too easily and lasts too long. "You're new here, right?" she asked. "Few months," I said. "Still learning who's who." She nodded, eyes drifting toward the window. "This place doesn't change much. People come and go. The coffee stays bad." I smiled at that. Maybe that's what keeps them coming back. There was a pause, not awkward, just slow. Like the space between two notes in a song that doesn't want to end. I noticed the ring on her hand then, simple gold, worn down at the edges. I didn't mean to look, but she caught me noticing. And for a fraction of a second, she didn't move her hand away. "I'm already taken," she said, soft but certain. I nodded, trying to match her calm. "Then let me be yours in silence." It came out before I could stop it. Not flirtation, not even defiance. More like something that slipped through the cracks of who I was supposed to be. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in thought. Then she laughed, a sound that carried a kind of disbelief. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said. "Why not?" "Because some things don't need to be said to exist." After she left, the shop felt heavier, like the air had remembered her. I wiped the counter twice, though it was already clean. Tried to focus on the hum of the fridge, the sound of passing cars outside. Anything but the image of her smile, the half that stayed after the other half faded. When I stepped outside at closing time, the evening light had turned the street into a soft watercolor, muted, uncertain. Across the road, she was waiting at the bus stop, looking down at her phone. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. Either way, I stood there longer than I should have. Watching, not out of longing, not yet, but something quieter. Something that hummed underneath the ribs, like the first warning of a storm still too far to name. That night, when I tried to sleep, I kept hearing her voice again, because some things don't need to be said to exist. And I wondered if she'd meant the coffee. Or us. She came back 2 weeks later. Not for the machine. That one was long gone. But for something else. She said the office printer had stopped working and that she didn't trust the new kid at the repair shop to handle it. "I figured you'd know what to do," she said, setting the bulky printer down on the counter. I didn't ask why she remembered my name from the receipt. I didn't ask anything, really. Just nodded and started checking the paper feed. The shop was quieter that day. Rain pressed against the windows like someone knocking gently, wanting in. She sat on the metal stool by the counter, arms folded, watching the puddles outside. Her jacket was still damp at the shoulders. "You shouldn't walk in this weather," I said, half focused on the tangled wires. She shrugged. Didn't feel like waiting for the car. Her tone was flat, but her eyes said otherwise. A kind of weariness that didn't come from rain or work. Something heavier. I handed her a cup of coffee. Not the good kind, just something warm. She accepted it with a soft, "Thanks." Both hands wrapped around the paper cup like it was the only thing holding her still. "Long day?" I asked. She exhaled through her nose, smiled faintly. "They're all long lately." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. She had this way of talking that made you listen for what she didn't say. I noticed the lines by her mouth, the way she pressed her lips together when she was thinking. The small tremor in her fingers when she set the cup down. "You ever get tired of fixing things?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," I said. mostly when they don't want to be fixed. That made her laugh, quiet, unexpected, real. Maybe that's true for people, too. Her eyes flicked toward mine then, and for a second, neither of us looked away. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even friendly. It was just seeing, like standing close to a fire and realizing how cold your hands have been. She pulled her coat tighter, breaking the moment. "You're too young to understand that," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "But I'm learning." The printer whirred to life a minute later, spitting out a half-printed test page. I pretended to focus on it, though my mind was somewhere else, replaying her laugh, the way her voice had cracked slightly when she said too young. When she stood to leave, she hesitated, just a flicker, like she'd almost said something and then swallowed it instead. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, nodded toward the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for fixing it." I wanted to ask what she meant, the printer or something else, but she was already gone, leaving behind the faint smell of rain and perfume. I found her cup still sitting on the counter, a smudge of lipstick on the rim, barely there. I almost wiped it away. Almost. It started raining again that evening, the kind of slow, steady rain that makes you believe time stopped moving. She came by just before closing, carrying a small desk lamp that wouldn't switch on. I know," she said, smiling faintly. "You'll start charging me rent here soon." Her voice had that tired humor people use when they're hiding something deeper. She looked different this time, her hair down, a faint smudge under her eyes like sleep hadn't found her in days. I told her I'd take a quick look. She lingered near the counter, tracing a finger along the rim of an empty mug. "Rough day?" I asked. "Rough week," she said, then added, quieter, "rough year." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Sometimes silence feels like the only language that doesn't betray you. When I bent to check the wiring, the lights flickered, and thunder rolled somewhere far off. She jumped slightly, hand resting on the counter's edge, close enough that when I straightened up, my arm brushed hers. Not a touch, just the awareness of space shrinking. Her perfume, faint, floral, mixed with the scent of rain-soaked pavement drifting through the open door. For a moment, I forgot what I was supposed to fix. "You ever feel," she began, then stopped. "Feel what?" She hesitated, her eyes distant. "Like you're standing at the edge of something, not sure if you're about to fall or finally start flying." I could have said yes. I could have told her she wasn't the only one. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded slowly, pretending to adjust the lamp switch, heart pounding louder than the rain outside. Her phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a name. She quickly turned face down. She didn't check it, didn't even flinch, just stared at it for a moment too long. "He still calls?" I asked before I could stop myself. She looked at me sharply, then softened. "Old habits die hard," she murmured. "People too, sometimes." Something in her voice broke then, not visibly, just a subtle drop, like the ground beneath her words had given way. I wanted to reach out, to say he shouldn't get to still matter, but the thought felt too loud, too dangerous. Instead, I handed her the lamp. "It's working now." "Thank you," she said, her tone steady again, professional almost. But her eyes didn't match her voice. They lingered on mine, searching for something unnamed. The rain outside grew heavier, the kind that makes conversation pointless. I offered to walk her to her car, but she shook her head. "I'll wait for it to slow down," she said. So I stayed too, leaning on the counter beside her. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty this time. It was charged, restless, full of what-ifs. When she finally turned to leave, she paused at the door, her reflection framed in the glass. For a heartbeat, she looked back at me, lips parted, like she was about to say something she'd regret. But she didn't. She just smiled, small, uncertain, and stepped into the rain. I stood there until the bell above the door stopped ringing, my hands still trembling from something that hadn't even happened. She didn't come by for almost 3 weeks. By the time she did, the seasons had shifted, sunlight lingering longer, the air heavier with the smell of warm asphalt, and something about to break. I'd stopped expecting her, or at least that's what I told myself. She appeared in the doorway late one afternoon, holding nothing, carrying only that same quiet that made everything else fade out. "You look like you've been somewhere else," she said. "I was starting to think you moved away." "I tried," she replied, with a small, tired laugh that didn't reach her eyes. There was no broken lamp, no faulty machine this time. She just sat on the stool, fingers twisting the edge of a paper napkin. I leaned against the counter, pretending to clean a wrench that didn't need cleaning. The fan hummed between us, slow and rhythmic. "You okay?" I asked eventually. She looked up, not at me, but past me, like the answer might be hiding somewhere behind my shoulder. "I don't know anymore," she said. "I keep waking up and realizing I don't recognize the life I built." I didn't say anything. Her voice was soft, fragile in the way people sound when they finally stop pretending. "I didn't mean to keep coming here," she went on. "It's just quiet here. No one asks for anything. I'm someone," I said before I could stop myself. That made her look at me properly, really look. "Yes," she said, "you are." Something changed in that moment. Not big, not loud, but irreversible. The kind of shift that makes the air too thick to breathe right. She stood, walked a few steps closer. "This isn't fair to you," she whispered. "You think I don't know that?" Her hand twitched, like she might reach for me, but she didn't. The space between us felt electric, too fragile to close. "What are we doing?" she asked finally. I almost laughed, because I'd been asking myself the same thing every night since she first walked into the shop. "I don't know," I said, "but I keep showing up anyway." The fan clicked once. The sound of the street outside faded to nothing. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, exactly, but with the effort of holding them back. "You shouldn't wait for something that can't happen," she said. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough to feel the warmth of her. "Then why are you here?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. The silence stretched, long and painful. Then she said, barely audible, "Because when I'm here, I remember what it feels like to want something without apologizing for it." She turned away then, the sound of her breath breaking the stillness. I didn't stop her, didn't move. When the door finally shut behind her, the smell of her perfume lingered in the air, and for the first time, it didn't comfort me. It felt like proof of something that could never be repaired. I didn't see her for a month after that day. The shop went on as usual. Repairs, customers, the same dull rhythm. But something about the air had changed. I'd catch myself glancing at the door whenever the bell rang, hoping and dreading it at the same time. Then one morning, when the sky was the color of wet concrete, I found a small envelope taped to the shop's glass door. No name, just my initials written in slanted handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Inside was a folded photo, two people standing on a beach. The woman in the picture was her, younger maybe by 15 years. The man beside her was older, his arm draped loosely around her shoulders. They were laughing, both of them. She was barefoot, hair wild in the wind. On the back, she'd written, "He died before we got to say goodbye. I don't know how to stop missing him. I don't know what you remind me of more, him or the part of myself that went with him." For a long time I just sat there at the counter, the photo trembling slightly in my hand. The rain outside started to build, soft at first, then steadier, matching the pulse in my throat. She didn't come that day, or the next, but 3 days later, she walked in quietly, like nothing had happened. Her expression unreadable. "You got it?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated, then sat down, eyes on the floor. "I shouldn't have left it like that," she said. "It wasn't fair." "I don't think fairness is the problem," I said. "It's honesty." That made her look up. "Honesty can ruin things. Sometimes it fixes them," I said softly. We stayed like that for a while, her eyes locked on mine, both of us balancing somewhere between guilt and something dangerously close to tenderness. "I was 29, she said finally. "He was my best friend before he was anything else. We built a whole life out of unfinished plans. When he died, I promised myself I'd never get close to someone who didn't already know the end of the story. And I don't," I said. "No," she said. "You don't. And that's what makes you impossible." The word impossible hung there, not as rejection, not as cruelty, but as confession. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small silver locket, and set it on the counter between us. Inside, I could see the same beach, the same two figures, her hand in his. I keep it with me, she said. But lately, I've started to forget his voice. And that scares me more than missing him. I didn't reach for the locket. I just said, quietly, maybe forgetting is how remembering starts to hurt less. She smiled, a sad, breaking smile, and closed the locket in her hand again. When she stood to leave, she brushed my sleeve lightly, almost nothing. But it felt like the whole world had tilted. I don't know what this is, she whispered. But I can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. And then she was gone again, leaving behind the faintest echo of a truth that neither of us had asked for, but both of us now carried. She showed up near closing time again. No words, no reason, just her. The shop was half dark, the only light coming from the small desk lamp she'd once brought in for repair. It glowed softly, casting warm circles across the counter. She stood in it like she belonged there, but not entirely. Like someone visiting a memory that isn't fully theirs anymore. I couldn't sleep, she said finally. Me neither. We both laughed, quietly, because it sounded too honest to be small talk. She walked over to where I stood, hands tucked into her jacket pockets. The scent of rain clung to her, faint but familiar. She looked older tonight, not in the way people age, but in the way people stop hiding it. I keep thinking, she said softly, how strange it is that something can feel wrong and right at the same time. I think that's how you know it's real. She looked at me then, and for once, didn't look away. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, alive, even. All the words we'd swallowed in the past months seemed to gather there, unspoken but understood. I don't know how to do this, she said after a while. I don't even know what this is. Neither do I said. But I don't want it to end pretending it never happened. Her shoulders dropped, not from defeat, but from release. Like she'd been holding her breath for too long. She came closer, close enough that I could see the fine lines near her eyes, the way her hair caught the light. I didn't move. Neither did she. Do you ever wish we'd met at a different time? She asked. Sometimes, I said. But then maybe we wouldn't have noticed each other at all. That made her smile, a quiet, tired smile that said she'd already thought the same thing. We stood like that for a long while, side by side, facing the soft light of the lamp. The rain outside had softened into mist, tapping gently on the window. She reached out, fingers brushing mine. A barely there contact that said more than anything words could ruin. I didn't grab her hand. I just let it rest there, both of us pretending it wasn't deliberate. Then she leaned her forehead against my shoulder, not as surrender, not as love, but as a kind of truce. The kind people find when they stop fighting what's already true. Neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly in the corner. The smell of coffee and rain hung in the air, grounding the moment in something ordinary, something real. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were calm. Not afraid, not guilty, just present. Whatever this was, she said quietly. Thank you for letting it exist. I nodded. It still does. She smiled, small, certain, and turned toward the door. The bell rang softly as she left. The light from the lamp flickered once, then steadied again. And for the first time, I didn't wait for her to come back. I just let the silence stay. It's been 6 months since I last saw her. Sometimes I still glance at the shop door when the bell rings, half expecting her to walk in with something broken in her hands. But she never does. And maybe that's the point. Some stories aren't meant to repeat themselves. The shop feels different now. Quieter, though the same sounds are still here. The hum of old machines, the rattle of drawers, the faint smell of burnt dust. It's me who's changed. The silence doesn't ache the way it used to. It just is. I still have the photo she left me. It sits tucked behind the register, not as a wound anymore, but as a reminder. Of her, yes, but also of the strange, fleeting way two people can find each other right when they're not supposed to. She taught me that love isn't always about beginnings. Sometimes it's about being seen, even for a moment, by someone who reminds you that you still exist, that you're still capable of wanting something honest, even if it can't last. I think that's what she gave me, not a story of us, but the permission to feel without needing to name it. To understand that connection doesn't always demand a future, Sometimes it just asks to be remembered with kindness. I heard from a mutual friend that she moved away, coastal town, smaller, quieter life. She volunteers at a local library, grows herbs on her balcony. I like to imagine her there, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, smiling at something small and ordinary. And me? I fix things. Still. But now I know some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be understood, then let go. When people ask why I never talk much about the past, I just tell them, because some things don't need to be said to exist. Funny, that was her line once. And now it's mine. Maybe that's what love really does. It doesn't stay. It lingers, reshapes, echoes. It leaves you softer, a little wiser, and a lot more human. So if you've ever had someone who passed through your life and left a quiet mark, someone who made you see yourself differently, even for a heartbeat, don't rush to forget them. Don't label it, or mourn it, or try to make it more than it was. Just hold the moment for what it gave you. Because sometimes the most beautiful thing about love is that it doesn't have to last forever to mean something. And maybe, in some quiet corner of her world, she remembers me too. Not as the boy who wanted her, but as the one who listened. If this story found a place in you, tell me, have you ever loved someone you were never meant to?